Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this awesome Thursday afternoon with Bounce Back. My name is Leah Siegel. I want to thank our producer, Rabbi Kevin Bemmel, and we have a special guest today. Some of you may have noticed, if you've joined us in the past, that I'm taking a little bit of a pivot. I'm changing a little bit of who I interview, who I spend time with, who I really bring to you as a community to really learn from. And what we're going to do is we're going to start talking about how to look at life differently, looking at setbacks, looking at challenges that we may face, adversities. We all have them, right? So how do we overcome them? What do we do when life smacks you in the face, right? So I am so excited. I can't even contain myself because the person we have on our show today is not just one of my best friends in the world. This woman actually is the person that changed my life on a few different setbacks that I've had personally, but we're not here today to talk about me. We might sprinkle in a few details of how awesome Chava is, but today we have Chava Floryn, and this is a woman who I've known since her bat mitzvah, okay? Even before that, we share so much. She's like a sister, and she has changed my life on many levels, and I'm so excited to bring you her. She is a singer, songwriter, playwright. She's wrote some books. She is the producer, and she is the creator of the Nuture Series Podcast. There's nothing this woman can't do. But Chava,
I can't ride a horse. I cannot ride a horse.
I'll take you horseback riding.
No, I can't. I get too terrified.
Really? I fell off a horse once, but I would love to hear why you don't want to ride a horse.
For that reason.
I live to tell. But, I was thinking the other day, what was the first profession I ever saw you really think about? And we were in high school, and I remember you sharing a secret with me.
Really?
And you said, I am getting a degree in gemology. I'm going to be a gemologist.
Yeah, that was my first endeavor. It's true.
I was in awe. I'm like, gosh, she's so ambitious. And then I remember you got your hands on a 90210 script, also same year in high school. And
yeah, I was in 10th grade. You were in 11th.
So let's talk about that, because was that script something that propelled you to start writing your own scripts? I want to know where this all began.
That's so funny that you remember that, because I remember that so clearly. We had our standing Thursday night teenage, soirees with like potato chips and Coca-Cola and 90210. We could not do it any other way. And I remember, I don't even know who gave it to me.
Your mother got her hands on it somehow.
It's always my mother. She's always the mastermind of the whole entire situation, my life and yours. But she, somehow or other, she got this script from 90210. And I was like, oh my God, the holy grail of a script of what's to come. So we got to see a preview of like what was happening the next week. But what was exciting to me was I got to read Luke Perry's role. I think that was like the sexiest moment of my whole teenage years, especially because we both went to a high school with no boys. I'm like, that was like the biggest turn on ever. But so definitely reading that script really shaped me, because it was like, this is so exciting to see the back and forth, to see how characters come alive. And like you said, at 15 years old, my mother was like, you need to have a career. You're going to go to college. And I was like, I don't know what I want to do. And then that summer, my grandparents were in the jewelry industry actually, the store is in its 60th year.
Is it still in San Bernardino?
It's in Ontario, actually. And I worked there this past year a few times, and I get to work there the whole month of November and December this coming year. It's kind of exciting. And so my uncle now runs the store. My grandparents have since passed away, but I used to go work there in the summers, and I ended up going to the jewelry diamond show in Las Vegas with my grandpa. And I had the best time because I love beautiful things. And my grandfather was the president of the Jewelers Association. And so Jewelers Association. So he was like, you really should just get in the jewelry business with me. And I was like, okay, like, that sounds like so much fun. But he was like, no, you have to do it. I'm going to pay for you to get the course. It was at the time correspondent. There was no internet back then. So you didn't have a computer to learn from. They would send you like the books and then you would read them and then you would send in the tests that you had to fill out with a proctor or whatever. And yeah, as soon as I graduated high school, I was already like a certified gemologist, and I went and worked in the Diamond District like right after that.
I love
For a
it. I
few
remember
years.
those days.
Yeah,
Speaking of correspondence, I did that when I was pregnant with my oldest, Isaac. I was in school to be an interior designer.
I
And
remember.
and I did it. I had to mail in all my projects. My teacher would send me back recordings on a cassette, him grading my work. Talk about snail mail.
But you and I think because we're both Pisces, we're both born a week apart in March, and we both have had like 9 lives. Like we both have had so many different, interesting, weird things that we just were like, okay, we'll try it. Let's try that. Let's try that. Right. We're both like extremely hard on ourselves. We have to be the best at whatever we choose to do.
It's a gift and a curse, right?
Yeah, I always say I'm like a jack of all trades, master of nothing.
But I disagree. This is why I wanted you on the show, because I think you're a master of so many things.
Thank you, Leah.
And maybe before we dive into some of the things you've had to challenge, maybe this is an appropriate time for me to just kind of share what you've done in my life and why I know you can help so many people. I've been through a lot of challenges. And I remember one of my biggest challenge was about 10 years ago financially. And you said something to me that woke me up that no one else on this planet could ever say to me, and I would hear it. I cried to you, literal tears, and I said, I can't afford rent. I'm struggling financially, being a single mom, 4 kids, and this isn't working. And that I gave you a whole list of things that aren't going right. And instead of giving me the pity party that I wanted, you said, get your shit together. And you don't need anyone else. You got this. You have everything in you to be financially independent. Stop relying on this and that. And you got this. When are you going to take responsibility? And I woke up that day was the first day.
I couldn't have just said that to anyone, by the way. Like, I'm not the kind of person who just like tells people to just like get a life. I know you well enough to know that you were looking for someone to tell you that,
Thank you.
You were at that point in your life where you were like at the edge of the cliff and you just needed that little push to jump off. Like you were already there. You just didn't know you were there,
Wow. I guess you saw it from the outside. I was in it,
Yeah.
Let's also tell the audience that about a year before that, you also had the honor of making my shidduch. You introduced me to my husband because Chava's husband and Jay were working together at the Jewish Federation. And she, that Jay tells everyone that we met online. And I said, what do you mean? We met through Chava. He says, yeah, but she emailed the 2 of us and introduced us in an email.
Oh, I have words with him. No, I remember Robbie and Jay have their own little love affair going. They love each other so much. And every day Robbie would come home from work and he'd be like, I have the most amazing guy that I go to work with. I love Jay. We're such good friends. And then I'm like, well, invite him over. And it had been like a year. I had still not met this famous Jay Siegel. And he came for dinner. And within minutes, I was like, oh my God, you're Leah's husband. I just had this feeling. So, and I said, I'm like, hey, would you have any interest in dating like a Chabadnik girl from a very Orthodox family? He was like, I mean, like, but like, why would you think, but why would you think that's a good idea? And Robbie's like, this is not a good idea. They're way too different. And I was like, no, it's actually a brilliant idea. They're way more similar than you realize. You both have the same infectious energy. And I just knew that you both would be amazing for each other. I'm so glad that you guys took the plunge. Makes me happy.
Well, that's a little plug for the matchmaker here, Chava. But
my matchmaker business.
Like I say, you're gonna, if you're listening in on this or you're watching it on YouTube later, I'll tell you, you're gonna learn a lot about the style that I bring. Is someone's going to learn something and walk away with something good. Chava has so much to share. She looks like everything's perfect and always everything went smoothly. But this is a woman who had to endure a lot. And so I'm going to tell you how I see the timeline. And this is where I want you to fill us in on what did you do when that didn't continue or when that didn't turn out the way you thought? Because I remember going to see you perform. You were singing, you were songwriting, you were amazing, amazing performer. I went to see some of your shorts. You wrote some scripts and we were in the theater together, and you collaborated with so many individuals that are well known in the industry. And so what pivoted you to do a podcast? I know you have a book coming out. I'm going to let you share with us how you see the timeline, because from the way I look at it, you are a woman who's good at everything you put your mind to, and you can do it all. So how do you choose different things to focus on?
ADHD, firstly, severe ADHD. I don't think I'm excellent at everything. I think I'm really good at knowing what I'm not good at and when I need to ask for help. And I'm really lucky that I surround myself with like people way smarter than me. That's like the real key to success, I think, and to overcoming like your own, like getting in your own way. But
take notes there, people. Surround yourself with people that are smarter than you
and more talented, and also just incredibly, the first thing is they have to have amazing integrity for me to work with you. Like you have to have really excellent integrity. And so I'm really lucky. I've gotten to work with really special people. But in terms of, I don't know how far you want me to go back. I can talk about, we could go way far back, like, from the Diamond days, but I don't want to bore everybody with the longest story ever. But I guess it would be my turning point was very connected with you too, Leah.
Really?
Yeah. I was about probably 28 years old, and I woke up in a sweat, crying with a really bad nightmare. And
were you in Pittsburgh at the time? Where were you?
I was in Pittsburgh. I think you know the story. And I really was shaking, and Robbie was like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "Something happened to Leah." And I couldn't even say it out loud, but I had this feeling like you had a miscarriage. I just felt it in my whole body. And I didn't want to call you the next day, because if I called you the next day, my fear was I would learn the truth. And about 4 months later, I wound up going to New York, and you and I met each other at a wedding. And I gave you a really big hug. And I remember saying to you, I actually just told the story last night at a class I gave. I remember saying to you, like, "Are you okay? Did you have a miscarriage?" And you said, "How did you know? Nobody knows this." And it was an ectopic pregnancy.
Yeah, it wasn't a normal miscarriage. It was,
right.
An ectopic pregnancy that ruptured.
Yeah.
That I didn't talk about with people.
Right. So nobody, well, now everyone knows.
Sorry. Now I talk about it because
okay, fine.
I'll tell you how many, this is 22 years ago.
Yeah, this is 22 years ago. And this was really a turning point for me, because somehow or other, I felt like our souls were like so divinely connected that I would feel that happened to you. And wildly enough, the exact same thing happened to me 2 years later. I was 30 years old, sitting on an OR table, bleeding out, in severe pain, thinking like, this is it. Like, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this. And I remember feeling like my whole life had flashed in front of my eyes. And all I could think of is all my regrets, like what I haven't done yet. And I, on that table, like before they even like put the anesthesia in my veins, I remember thinking like, there's 3 things I need to accomplish if I wake up. 1 is I'm going to write a script. I'm going to make a movie. 2 is I'm going to write a book. And 3 is I'm going to record a song. That was in my head. I was like, this has to happen, because it's been in me since I'm a little kid. Wow. So I knew I had to do it in some way or some fashion. And then when I woke up, I remember like, it was a 7 or 8 hour surgery. I had to have several blood transfusions. I mean, I was sick. I really almost lost my life. I could feel it slipping out from underneath me. And
this wasn't your first run-in with health issues.
No, I had other near-death experiences, but this one was like the most significant because it felt so acute, like it was slipping, Whereas like when I was 17, I had a lump in my breast and I thought I was dying and I thought I had cancer. And
I remember where I was sitting when you shared that with me in your living room. I thought it was a lie. I'm like, this doesn't happen to us in high school. Like,
no.
she's so lying. I couldn't believe
and
it.
back then it was like, you know, if you had the surgery and you do it a biopsy, it's not like today where it's like there's like a 24-hour turnaround. It's 2 weeks of wondering, do I have to go on chemo or not? And at 17 years old, that was like so daunting. It was like the first time. You don't think you have to really think about, you know, your mortality at 17. So that was, thank God it wasn't, and it was a benign tumor. But and then again, I had a near-death experience when I was 21. It was my first pregnancy, and it was a molar pregnancy. And again, I was told that I might have to go on chemotherapy, that it might be a malignant pregnancy. It turned out that it wasn't, but again, had to wait 2 weeks wondering, you know. And so those kind of things definitely shape you in terms of like decision making and like the way that you're gonna tackle life. And but the event that occurred when I turned 30, 2 years after your topic, was by far one of the most like defining experiences for me. And I remember when I woke up, on one side of my face was my dad, on the other side of my face was my mom, which was really significant because they had not spoken in like 3 years because they were in the midst of a very, very, very torrid divorce. And I remember opening my eyes and looking at them in the same room going, am I dead? Why are you both in the same room? What's happening? And in some ways that event really began the healing, I think, in some ways, of, you know, some of the difficulty that my parents had weathered. And there was some, you know, like newness that occurred. And I think that that's, you know, if there's one message I could give in terms of like adversity coming your way, there's always a silver lining to something really devastating happening. Always. You may not see it right then and there, but that's very much like the theme of the book that I've written over the course of the last 2 years, which is that, like, actually the title of my book is Everything is Going to Be Okay: How to Nurture Yourself During a Storm. And the reason why I chose that title, I could have really chosen any title, but that title meant something to me because when I was a kid, my father used to say, whenever things were going a little off, he'd look at us and he'd say, Egbach, everything's going to be okay. And it was actually something that had been created by 2 radio hosts years ago. I think it was like on K-Rock or something like that. So, and he used to say it to us. And it didn't make sense that he would say it for many reasons. First of all, he wasn't Pollyannish about difficult things. He had lost his father at 9 years old in a tragic way. He had a massive heart attack, leaving my grandmother a widow at the age of 36 with 3 small children. So my father knew that things don't always turn out the way you want them to. So he didn't say everything's going to be okay because everything turns out rosy all the time. I think he said it because of the key word in that phrase, gonna. Things are not okay right now, but they're gonna be okay later.
And if it's not okay yet, it means you're not done yet.
You're not done. Exactly. You're just not done yet. That's such a beautiful way of saying it. And I think that for me, you know, in all the experiences that I've had, they may be like the most painful, the most difficult, but when you're sitting in the mud, when you're sitting in the pain and in the suffering, that's not the time to sort of, you're not done. So you have to give yourself that, you know, generous, I guess, love to say, like, I can get through this. And there is going to be a day that I wake up and I'm out of this really difficult spot.
Wow.
To trust in that.
You know, this wasn't part of what I was going to talk about today, but I feel compelled because you're mentioning your father and your mother, and it would be so crazy not to mention the amount of love that they have shown personally to me. What's really crazy is Raisy's on this call, and Raisy and I both experienced what it was like to live in your house and be a part of your family.
I'm sorry. We were definitely a crazy bunch, you know.
My best memories are the fact that your parents treated me like their own, and they also would not even take any money from my parents to have me live with you for my entire senior year in high school.
Yeah.
My 18th birthday was my parents showing up at your parents' door with roses for my 18th birthday.
Yeah.
You know,
I
I was
remember that.
in your brother's bedroom and Razy lived downstairs. I remember this. And your parents always had an open door policy, full of
Yeah.
love, always giving us what they gave you.
Yeah.
And I learned so much about work ethic from your mom. You know,
Yeah.
she's always been a mentor to me, and your father working hard at the hospital, and he'd come home with his crazy funny stories.
Oh yeah, the best.
That's another setback. I've watched your family really be in pain from losing him
Yeah.
and the struggle. I remember you sharing with me in Roxbury Park. You said, I'm going to take you for a walk. I have to talk to you. And one of my children, how old were they at the time? Maybe 2. And you shared with me about that they're getting divorced. And I couldn't wrap my head around it.
Yeah. I don't think any of us could really wrap our head around the fact that it had actually ended, because there was so much love. And in all of that love, there was so much pain. And they themselves had so many setbacks that were just not even in their control. And sometimes when you go through like a lot of continuous setbacks, you don't have any more oxygen to fill your tank for the other person. You know, I definitely saw that firsthand. And that's definitely, I would say, kind of for sure has driven my my inspiration to create the Nuture series. Because so the reason why I created the podcast is because it was 2020, March 2020, everybody had gone into lockdown. I was actually slated for 2 television shows. I was so excited. I was like, I made it into the big leagues, right? And through Warner Brothers, both kind of talk show style shows, and they were going to be under the same auspices. So that would have meant there would have been cross, marketing and breeding. And I was just going to be like this, like really a lot of excitement. I had just finished shooting a pilot that we were about to go and pitch, and another pilot that I had just finished. I had just finished working on a documentary that had just had its debut. So there was so much happening, and like my life was like really full, and I was super excited about all these amazing opportunities. And then COVID hit and everything stopped. Like everything, production stopped, decisions stopped, pitching stopped, and no one knew how long it was going to be. Was it going to be 3 months, 4 months, 2 years, 5 years? And I was just like, I got to do something. And at the same time that this is all happening, we're all trying to like figure out, whether the world's coming to an end or not, trying to, contend with all of the uncertainty. My husband is the rabbi of a young professional congregation here in Beverly Hills at Beth Jacob, with like 650 young professionals that we interface with on a weekly basis. And suddenly we can't see them every week. And so now we have to figure out ways to be innovative and teach them and see them. And so I just went into like Rebbitzin mode, rabbi's wife mode. I just went into, okay, I'm going to start teaching classes. I'm going to engage. I know how to engage, on screen in an interesting, dynamic way because of my background in film. So we started just creating like a ton of content and engaging constantly. And the calls started coming in of couples who were really struggling with staying together during that time, being locked in the same house, kids being, most of these are young couples, in their late 20s, early 30s. Some of them are singles who all of a sudden found themselves unable to date. And so the loss of this, that everybody was feeling of, how to really tune in to their vulnerability. I myself was going through my own chaos in my own marriage with my children about to empty nest, the pandemic looming, now stuck in the house, like couldn't find a spot for myself to like even breathe because every corner is with every human. And so, yeah, we fought a lot and I was just like miserable. And I realized I had not dealt with a lot of my own grief that I had just compartmentalized over the years. And at the time, one of the programs that we set off was called the Nuture Series. And we invited all of our young couples to tune in on a Zoom. I sent them dinner and wine. And someone said to me, oh, would you do a class on, Shalom Bayit, on helping people with their marriage. And I was like, what the hell do I know? I've had one. Like, I don't, I'm not an expert. I'm not a therapist, you know? So I said, I'll tell you what I will do. I'll create a Zoom that like this kind of event, and we'll invite the couples to come for date night. And I will interview the experts, and I will get you the best experts, the people that I know how to couple well, how to nurture relationships, and how to be nurturing parents, and how to be nurturing to oneself, because I knew what was on the line. I had lived through it with my own parents' divorce. And that began like this. It was super successful. We had, I think, 4 really fantastic speakers. And it launched itself into, I just wanted more. I wanted more information. I started reading like 4 books a week on the subject, on all different kinds of like, you know, gaining access to overcoming adversity, to overcoming trauma, to coupling better, like anything I could get my hands on, I read. I watched every podcast on the issue. I mean, I was like drinking as much information as I could. And then I was just bringing it to our congregation in a podcast form. And after I had gone through all of this work, I ended up deciding I have to actually get better. So that was 2020. And then 2021, it was like, okay, I was continuing on with my podcast, but I really wanted to get my own shit together because I was not doing great. And I realized that. So I hired a therapist. I had a performance coach. Hi, Aman, love you. All the way in, he was a monk. He lives all the way in Amsterdam. I found this guy on a television show, by the way, but whatever. Wow. That's a whole nother story. I had my own energy healer that I met with every weekly. My massage therapist weekly. Literally, I like called in the cavalry. I was like, I've got to get myself in order here. My kids are about to leave. My son was about to leave. And I have to be okay with empty nesting. And it's no joke. Okay. It is like the hardest thing in the world. Right, Leah, you know. And so I wound up doing the work, and it was harder than anything I've ever done in my whole life. And then June 15th came, and I had my last session with Aman, my performance coach. And he wasn't just my performance coach. He was like a little bit of everything. Oh, plus I had my therapist who I met with every single week also. And we had our family therapist that we met with. So there was a lot of healing going around. You know, it's like a full year of like super highly intensive. And June 15th came, 2021, and I'm like, I'm good. I am flying. I mean, I felt like the world was at my, you know, like, was just like, I had the world in my hands. I was ready to roll in life. June 15th was also the day that all the mask mandate was lifted in Los Angeles and in Las Vegas. My husband and I traveled there with our family. It was going to be the first trip in many years, you know, since the pandemic, but also the last trip before my son went off to college and my daughter left, you know, finally, and my son moved out of the house. And we were stoked about this trip because we had a granddaughter, the first granddaughter of our family, getting married. Robbie was going to officiate the wedding. And then on June 16th, I rushed Robbie to the hospital with acute sepsis. They told me he had leukemia and he had a heart attack and that he was dying. And after 21 hours in the ER, with an ER that was so short-staffed, they wanted to just put him in the lobby and let him just basically wither away. And me running around like a maniac, figuring out ways to get him the care he needed, and doing everything I could, no short of like going to the chaplain at the hospital and basically maneuvering my way under, you know, the current of the hospital administrative, you know, hierarchy and craziness. So much so I even called like the CEO of the hospital, and I was like, what the hell is this craziness? You know, one nurse to like 12 patients, no doctors on staff. It was really bad. And I basically like begged the nurse to give him an IV. And I knew that when a patient is septic, you have 48 hours before a patient can no longer, you know, have a turnaround. They die. That's it. And we were now in hour 36, and he had not been treated. So I knew the clock was ticking, and thank God the nurse was kind of in her own way, kind of looked around and just like literally ignored protocol. I'll forever be grateful to her. And she basically just said, F it, and hooked him up to the right thing. What conspired from there was he actually did not have leukemia. He had a heart infection. He had endocarditis and many different things wrong with his heart. So his heart was working at like 20%. And basically, after 2 weeks of me living at the Palazzo and him living at Sunrise Hospital in Las Vegas, the doctor said, okay, you have 4 hours to get him home. You have to drive him there, and within 4 hours, because he needs his next dose of antibiotic. If he doesn't get it, he will go and become septic again. His heart's working at 20%. Just don't die. Don't do anything. Don't move. Don't get your heart rate above anything. There's no sex, no walking, no joy. You just don't move. And I looked at Robbie and I'm like, oh, dude, you're not going to make it. I mean, I was so terrified. I was like, see, especially the doctor's like, whatever you do, don't get him upset. I'm like, you're definitely not going to make it. But we drove home in a frenzy, white knuckled it all the way in time for his next dose. And then from then we kind of figured, okay, like after 3 months, we'd be out of the woods. 6 weeks later, we went to the doctor, the cardiologist, who said, no, actually, you have a very serious issue and you have to have open heart surgery. So I was not prepared for any of this on the night before my children were leaving for college. And you don't think about your mortality at a young age. I had to think about mine at a young age, but I never had to think about my husband's. And that threw me for a loop. I just was not prepared for any of this. I wasn't prepared for a lifelong living with hospitals, and forever he'll be a cardiac patient. And even though he's doing wonderfully right now, and he had a really miraculous turnaround, he's still a heart patient. There's still always that wonder, like, when will it happen again?
Wow.
But at the same time, had I not done that work before, there is no way I would have handled the summer. And I listen, there were moments that I definitely didn't handle it well, but I think for the most part, I handled it pretty damn well. And there's no way I would have handled it well or recovered well had I not had that year of like real intense therapy and help to get over trauma. And one of the things I recognized, the turning point for me, was a week before his surgery, everything went back to craziness again with the pandemic, and the Delta variant was going crazy, was going strong. So they wound up making a rule at his hospital that no one was allowed to come with him when he had his open heart surgery. And I lost it. I just could not get past that at all. It was like the last straw.
So what did you do?
I did something I've never done before. And that is that I totally and completely surrendered. And it was hell. Because surrendering is not something that one does with peace and harmony. Surrendering is something you do yelling and screaming and crying a lot and telling God that, get your act together. This isn't working, But I had to learn the art of surrendering. And as a result of this experience, one of the things that I came to realize was that, I don't think that anybody ever really figures out the true art to letting go. We all want to hold on to a little piece of our power, thinking that we're in control. And when you're at that place where you're like, I am not in control of any of this stuff, and you finally kind of let go, there is something very freeing about it. And when I finally actually did let go, like I just allowed myself to do it, I gave myself permission, I felt almost like I was in this blissful, hazy state. It was really weird. And I think that's what happens when you finally have this like aha moment, when you're like at the precipice of something huge, that it ends up becoming easier. It doesn't become harder to get to that place. It actually gets easier, if that makes sense. But I shut my phone off to do this. I told every person in my family I was not going to be available. No one was allowed to call me. I had to go into my own chamber and I had to figure this out on my own, how I was going to like get through that experience. I didn't want anyone's noise. I didn't want anyone telling me it's going to be okay. I didn't want anyone telling me how to do it. I wanted to listen to the reverberations of my own soul and my own story telling me what to do.
Wow. I can imagine that was the hardest thing, because you have so many people in your life who lean on you, who love you. You're the oldest.
Yeah.
And you have children and you have nieces and nephews and siblings and their spouses.
Yeah.
Best friends. I mean, you're always the strong one for everyone. And we were all going, is she okay? Because she's always there for us. Who's there for her? Because we want to be there for you. And I remember you saying, you can't come over, Leah, because in case they're going to let me go to the hospital, and in case you give me something, I can't be around anyone.
Right. And Robbie couldn't be around anyone because I couldn't risk him getting COVID with his heart working at 20%. And the other thing that I also recognized why I was having such a rough time is this is 3 generations of trauma around heart disease. My grandfather died of a heart attack. My father had a heart attack and had open heart surgery at the age of 52. That summer, I ended up taking care of him. I was his caregiver because shortly after that, my mother and father separated. So a lot of his recovery was on me for 3 months. And so here I am back where I started. And my grandmother told me a story my entire childhood.
Which Bubby?
Bubby Shirley,
okay.
My dad's mom. The one who was a widow at 36. You know, she every time
Leisure World. I just think Leisure World.
Yeah. And every single time she would talk about my grandfather, she would literally just tear up. And one time I said to her, like, when I was much younger, and I heard the story again a million times, but what was it about this that really brings you to tears? And she said, you know, that night I ended up going to visit your grandfather in the hospital. And my grandparents were very physical with one another. And my grandfather, even after his heart attack, said to my grandmother, stay the night and come to bed with me. And she said, you just had a heart attack. I can't have sex with you. Plus, I have to go home to the children. I'll be back right in the morning. And he died that night. And she could never forgive herself. And so here I am about to send
Never heard this story, Chav. My God.
Yeah. And here I am about to send my husband to the hospital on the biggest surgery that anybody could possibly go through. I mean, open heart surgery is harder than brain surgery, to be honest. You know, they completely rip you completely open. And there were all these variables that they told us we should be expecting that were not great. And we were just like, I was just like, well, see you later, I guess. Like, I don't even know how to say goodbye. So I put all my energy into every day during that week. I wrote him a letter. I wrote him like these love letters. And I wanted him to have a letter because they told me originally he'd be in the hospital for up to 10 days. So I wrote him 10 letters and I didn't think he'd read them during the time he was there. But I'm like, well, maybe he might. Who knows if he feels better, if he feels okay. I don't know. I didn't think he would, but I wanted him to have like something to take with me, you know, to take with him. I wanted him to feel like I was right next to him. And I felt like my words were all I could give him. And in the 10th letter, I had actually completely forgotten what I had even written in that letter. I like completely forgot. And on day, like, I think it was like, I don't know, like 3 weeks after his surgery, he actually did come home after 5 days. And they had told us he was going to need a mitral valve replacement, which was really a tough surgery in terms of the recovery and what your life is like afterwards. It's not a great outcome. It's the best outcome. It means 10 more years of your life, not much more than that. So I decided I was going to just write the letter as if it already came to pass. And I said, you didn't need a valve replacement. You needed just a valve repair. You are doing better than anyone ever expected. You left the hospital after 4 days or 5 days.
Whoa.
And I literally wrote everything that I wanted to happen.
You're amazing.
And 3 weeks later, when he read the letter, he was just in tears. He's like, how did you predict all of that? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't even remember writing that letter. I don't even know. And every one of those things came true. And it taught me something a lot about surrender. It really did. It taught me that when you surrender from something, you need to write your story. Now, that doesn't always mean that your story is going to come to pass the way you want it to, but it also doesn't mean that it won't. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know people who are like, they believe with all their heart they were going to have a different outcome. It didn't happen. Then they're disappointed. And there's not always the outcome that you want. And I don't know why we had that outcome. I don't think I have more power than anyone else has power in terms of their prayers. You know, no one's prayers are more than somebody else's. I can only say that was my experience, and it was miraculous, and I'm beyond grateful for it.
Wow. You know, God puts you in situations where you're wearing many hats at different moments. Yeah. I mean, you literally can be in a medical setting. You don't have a medical background or degree, but you've been in so many situations where you literally could be a nurse today. You know it all. I don't think there's a field that you're not familiar with. Pick a field, you know it well, you can carry yourself in that setting. And it's a really big gift, Chav. And I think back to that Vegas, those 30 hours, and how you were the advocate. And if not for you putting up a fight and a fit and a tantrum, let's call it that, even though you weren't on the floor screaming like a 2-year-old, but getting on the phone with
at one point I think I was. I actually think at one point I actually was. And the hardest thing in all of it, honestly, was my husband, because he is such a passive and sweet guy. And he wants to be so compliant, especially in the medical community. He's not used to the medical world because he didn't grow up in it like I did. So he just wants to be like, just let them do what they need to do. And I'm like,
I'll wait.
No. I'm like, no, they are not doing what they want to do. If they do what they want to do, you will not be here tonight. You know, like, and he just,
that.
Yeah, you have to claw your way into, you can't just take everything face value. You know, just because someone's wearing a uniform and they tell you to do something, you don't always have to comply. If you have a sense that something is off, you have to speak your mind. It's your body. You can take control of it, you know?
Well, before we get into some questions from our audience, because if you showed up in live person, you get to talk to Chava. I just want to ask you, share with us what's next for you.
I'm really figuring that out, and I'm being really open to the universe, and I'm like so excited because this is the first time that I don't really know yet. Like, there are some things that I know, but there are other things that I'm like, something's good, it's cooking. I just know it. Right now I have a book that's coming out. Again, can't give you the date because my editor is still working on it, but I finished my part of this.
Your part. We're going to put it in the notes, in the footnotes of our YouTube channel. We're going to have the name of your podcast is there and the name of your book. So this way people can get in touch with you. If you have a link tree, you can send that over to Kevin and he'll put that there as well. So people can reach you, find your website or your social media. And I'm so grateful for our friendship, our lifelong journey together. And it's not even all written yet. That's what's so amazing. You know, we know you were at my daughter's birth. I have a 26-year-old that Chava was there, and Robbie and her mom for me.
Wait, can I just tell that story? Because it's actually my favorite story of all time. I had not had kids yet. And it was my first birth I had ever seen and witnessed. And at one point, first of all, your ex was sitting there eating like pastrami sandwiches, because of course I brought him those. And then Robbie's sitting there like just trying not to look, because he's just like, what the heck is this? And my mom was your coach. It was a whole party in your room.
Of course, it's the one birth that I had without an epidural, and that's the one she witnessed.
Yeah, and so she's in the middle of pushing, and at one point, I say, oh my God, I'm so sick. I'm going to be sick. And so the doctor turns to us and goes, are you going to be okay? And I'm like, I don't know. I think I have to sit down. And he goes, I was talking to Leah. I'm like, oh yeah, yes, as you were. I'll never forget that.
Oh my God, I love you so much. Well, I wanted to give anyone a chance if they have a question or a comment or an inquiry. I'm so glad we have Mark with us. I haven't seen you in so long, and Fred from our community in Santa Clarita. It's so nice. And of course, Razy, who I've known since I'm even younger than 10. We were probably 2 years old growing up in the same community. And so,
Hi, Razy.
yeah. So this is a
Nice.
time if you want to ask Chava any questions. Maybe Kevin has a question. And if not, I have plenty.
So, Chava, in the work that you do with other people, how do you get people to open up to you when it's not their natural inclination to do so, but you may sense that they need some kind of release, or they need to talk or something? How do you deal with that particular issue?
Funny, I just had this exact thing happen last night. So I started 15 years ago. I developed this program called Mission Possible, and it's about, I basically teach people how to find their own personal mission. It's really grounded in like Jewish Torah and thought, but it's also grounded in pop culture, pop psychology. And I take a little bit of everything. It's like a 5 or 6 part series, depending on, and I can break it down. I've done it in a 3-part series, but so I'm starting it again, and I have a cohort of like 10 or 15 women who are working on this over the course of the next few weeks. And there was one person in our group who, shared with me after that she like doesn't really want to share what's going on with her. She has a really hard time. She's really, she's been through trauma, and so it's been on my mind. That question has actually been on my mind. And the thing that I find is the easiest way to get somebody to really open up when they have like something going on where they just can't, is to ask a lot of questions, because most people really want to talk about themselves, and most people really want to answer those questions for themselves. And if you just stay curious, if you stay curious in the question, then a lot of times those answers will arise. Years ago, I got the opportunity to work on a project called The Search. It was a series of snackable, cute little, it was a web series, snackable content for a production company called the Nationlight Productions. The goal was to ask people, what is the meaning of life? And I got to interview like really interesting people, celebrities and writers and authors. And the one thing that probably like one of my favorite interviews was with an actor named Corbin Burnson, who I had met at at some sort of like film festival. And I asked him if he would be so kind to, come on and do a series with us. And he took me to his office, and in his office, it used to be his first house. Now he lives in a big grander house, but he turned his first house into his office. And then in the back was this like she shed that was filled with like hundreds of thousands of snow globes of every single kind. And it was like one of the most like memorable conversations, because I was like, okay, dude, what's with the snow globes? And he's like, because I believe that every single one of us are in our own little tiny world, in our own little tiny like universe. And we forget that there's like a much bigger universe out there. And so he became like really obsessed with collecting snow globes. But that was just one of the examples of, what it's like to ask people these really meaningful questions. But I don't know if that's something he necessarily thought about. But when you because I asked the question, why, where did that come from? What is this obsession? It made him think more deeply about the question, about, what drives him. I think questions are the most important thing when it comes to like really connecting with people.
It's crazy you're saying this. I know the question was aimed towards Chava, but as you're saying something, I was about to type in the chat, be curious, and you said the word curious.
Yeah.
I just had the honor of having, I don't know if you ever heard of Barry Ryan. He is the creator of Selling Through Curiosity, and he's a professor at Harvard, and he brings his curiosity courses to corporate all over corporate, different organizations all around the country. And he came and taught us, and we had to take the course with him, graduate, and become a teacher. So I took his course and then I taught his course, and it's called Selling Through Curiosity. And the number one thing that he says is exactly what you said. It's not about asking questions that are yes and no. Stay away from closed-ended. Open-ended questions would be something as simple as, tell me more.
Yeah.
Tell me,
Tell me
you
more.
don't ask someone, are you married or do you have kids? Tell me about family.
Yeah.
The word tell me, or, oh, wow, how so? Right? Whatever they're going to be comfortable to their limit. And as Chava said, the people do like to talk about themselves. The most important name in the most important word in the universe is what? Someone likes to hear their own name.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Yeah.
Using their name. And wow, that was a great question, Kevin, and even greater answer. It's so true. And speaking of snow globes, our son BB also collects snow globes.
Oh, really? That's cute.
Yeah.
Him and
But
Corbin
now I'm going to
Burnson.
look at them differently. They're
Yeah.
not just toys. Now I'm like, they're humans
Yeah.
within their own world.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you for
It
sharing
is.
that.
And that's what I loved about the name of our show, The Search, because we were constantly searching. You know, it was really about staying curious and searching for answers. You know, and I say that to my kids all the time. We had this amazing existential conversation around the Seder table, where I have one son who's a bit of a cynic in terms of like he just doesn't he doesn't take anything for face value. Like, explain to me why you believe this is, the basic question. And then another son who thinks so deeply that he just believes so much that it's overwhelming. And then my daughter who just like takes everything at face value and it just has no problem with faith. It's like, yeah, this is just, I could feel it. It's in my body. I just know it. And so the conversations around the table are always like, but how do you know? But, and I always tell my children, when you can stay curious and you continue to ask these questions, that itself is a spiritual experience. The people who don't ever ask the questions are the ones who really suffer, right?
Powerful.
Yeah.
You know that commercial, stay thirsty, my friends?
Yeah.
Stay curious, my friends. You got to
Yeah,
stay curious. And actually, it's funny. Then you hear the flip side of that is like curiosity killed the cat. The truth is, it's being curious to the right people in the right setting. And there's a very delicate way to do it without being nosy. It's showing you care, because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And how do you show genuine concern? Imagine this, you're going on a date and the guy just talks about himself. He doesn't ever ask you any questions, right? And
right.
You're like, he doesn't even know anything about me. He's not taking the time to wonder. There's no wonder and there's no curiosity. We as women, and I'm sure men are like this too, we want someone to be into us. And how do we know? It's because they want to know more and they ask good questions.
There's a really good source for this in the Torah. There's the story of Rebecca and Eliezer. Eliezer was Abraham's servant and sent him on his way to go search for a wife for his son Isaac. And he gets to the watering hole, and Rebecca feeds his camels. And there's a sentence that says that Eliezer wondered, and the word for wonder is mishta, which also means thirst.
I just got chills.
Right?
Wow.
And so it's the first time we ever see somebody in the Torah really being curious and staying in the curiosity. And in the second part of the verse, it says he wondered in silence. Because when you're wondering in your deepest place, in your quiet place, that's when you have great, articulation of your aha moment. You can't wonder in the noise. And that's one of the reasons why I turned my phone off that week when I had to surrender, because I needed the quiet to feed my soul, to give me the answers.
Wow.
I needed that.
I love how we are wrapping this up, because it's giving me so much to take away and think about, as I'm sure all the listeners that are with us live and that will replay the things we talked about. There's so much there.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that I have to tell you, if not for you, Chav, I would not have even made this kind of pivot or change in how I'm going to bring information to the masses, right? To reach more people. I called you. We were talking about what was coming up for me, and you're always Hashem gives you this wisdom in which to impart on others at the right time that they need to hear it. I've never been in a situation where you didn't help me through something.
Thanks, Leah.
And you have that gift.
Well, thank you so much for bringing me on. You're a fantastic interviewer. I always knew that you had this gift, by the way.
Thank you.
Not surprised at all that you're so flawless at this. So this has been really enjoyable. Thank you for including me in this new pivot. It's exciting.
Of course. And if you want, you can say out loud if there's any, talk about your social media while we wrap up, if anyone wants to jot down how to find Chav.
Yeah. So I go by my first Hebrew name and my middle English name. That's kind of my pen name is Chava Floryn, even though my last name is Tombosky. So so chavafloryn.com has all of my content on it, and you can read blogs and watch my Nuture Series podcast on there. I'm also on Spotify and iTunes, and of course, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all the good stuff that you have to do, but that I hate doing, but I do, that sort of thing.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Chava Tzipora Chaya Fega. How many
Yeah.
people will say that to you and know your full name?
Yeah, that's right. Not everybody knows my full name. Massive identity crisis here, people. 6 names will do that to you.
I am excited for what's to come. I know that we only touched upon a little bit, the tip of the iceberg of what impact you make on people's lives. And, one of the things you also got me to do that I've never done before was run my first half marathon, because
That's right.
I had just gotten married 3 years ago. It's almost 4 years. And you said, you're running the marathon with me because we're raising money for Yitzi. Now, our best friend from high school, her husband has ALS.
Yeah.
And we were collecting money and raising money for Yitzi Harwitz. Together, we raised over $100,000 with the team, and we went to Miami and we ran the Miami Marathon. I wasn't a runner. I said, I'm not a runner. You said, don't worry, we'll walk it. We'll figure it out. And I ended up hiring someone to coach me and train me how to run. But you always
let me just say,
break out of my comfort zone in crazy ways.
But not only did you hire someone to teach you how to run, this chick ran faster than all of us, this little brat. Okay. I'm like, I'm walking because I can't run worth anything because I just can't. And she's literally like, whoosh, she's Speedy Gonzalez on the field. It was really wild. But I have to give a shout out to Bracha, our good friend Bracha, who really was the brilliance behind the Run for Yitzi marathon. It's going on strong. She started with one person. She called me one day and she was like, I think I'm going to do a marathon and raise money for Yitzi. What do you think about this idea? I'm like, I think it's a ridiculous idea. Why would you do this? Why would anyone run? And she started with one person. This year, I don't know how many years later, maybe it's 8 or so, 100 runners they had on their team.
And they raised how much? Over $250,000?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
This year they did. Yeah. So,
we have amazing friends. Bracha's one of my classmates who graduated high school with me. I've known since 7th grade. She lives out in Miami. We were small but mighty. Graduated 5 girls in our class. Yeah. And we're still, all close in touch. Some of us are grandparents. Some of us
I'm still the younger one. I didn't graduate with you.
I know. She's a year younger.
I get to say that for the rest of our lives, that I'm the younger one. I used to hate that. Now I love it.
Now you love it. And we give you permission to keep saying it. No problem. As long as we get to say it, we're good. Right?
That's right.
Thank you all. Next week, guess who I get to have on? I'm actually going to be interviewing my very own husband, Rabbi J. Siegel. About coming from the depths, and his journey of being a rabbi and other things that are more personal. So I'm excited to bring that all to you. So make sure to subscribe to the Way to Wow show, or join us live, even better, next Thursday, 1:00 p.m. Have an incredible rest of your week.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you,
nice
Kevin.
Meeting you guys.